She stood outside the mansion in the rain, holding her stomach. And he didn't stop her. Alexander Vaughn didn't even look back. "Leave," he said coldly. At that moment, it sounded like anger. But that one word would destroy everything. Isabella didn't argue. She didn't beg. She just nodded slowly like she already knew something he didn't. And then she turned and walked away. But wait. Here's the shocking part. She was pregnant. And he knew. Still, he let her go. Because just minutes earlier, a message had appeared on his phone. A photo. A report. A truth that didn't make sense. The DNA results. And according to it, the child she was carrying wasn't his. At least, that's what he believed. But what Alexander didn't know, what he couldn't see in that moment, was that the truth had already been twisted. Carefully, deliberately, by someone very close to him. And Isabella, she wasn't just walking away from her husband. She was walking away from a life, a secret, and a truth that would change everything. Because what would be discovered later, in a quiet hospital hallway, through a single letter, and a DNA result that came too late, was something no one saw coming. Isabella Vaughn was not the kind of woman people noticed loudly. She didn't try to stand out. She didn't need to. There was something calm about her, something steady. Even in a room full of powerful people, expensive suits, and sharp voices, she stayed quiet. And somehow, that made people look at her even more. Every morning, she woke up before the sun. Not because she had to, but because she liked silence. She would sit by the window in the mansion, one hand resting gently on her stomach, breathing slowly, thinking, waiting. Sometimes she smiled for no reason. And sometimes she looked like she was carrying something much heavier than just a child. Alexander never noticed that part. To him, Isabella was simple, too calm, too trusting. And that was his problem. Alexander Vaughn wasn't just a billionaire. He was a man who built his world on control. Everything had to make sense. Everything had to be verified. Everything had to be proven. Because once a long time ago, he trusted someone blindly, and it destroyed him. So he changed. He stopped believing easily, stopped trusting completely, stopped loving without doubt. Even Isabella, especially Isabella, but she never complained. She always said the same thing, softly. "I'll explain later." Or, "It's not what you think." And somehow, that only made things worse. Because to a man like Alexander, silence felt like guilt, and calmness felt like hiding something. Still, there were moments, small ones, quiet ones, that he couldn't explain. Like the way she looked at him when he wasn't watching, or how she held his hand when he was stressed without saying a word, or the way she protected that pregnancy, like it meant more than just a child. But Alexander ignored those moments, because doubt was louder, and doubt always wins when trust is weak. Then one day, something small happened, so small it didn't seem important. Isabella received a call. She looked at the phone, paused, and then declined it. Alexander noticed. "Who was that?" he asked. "No one important," she said calmly. And that was it. But she didn't know. That moment would stay in his mind. Because it wasn't the first time. The phone kept ringing. Different times. Different days. Same reaction. She would look, hesitate, then ignore it. And every time, Alexander watched. Silently. Carefully. Suspiciously. But she didn't know. That was the beginning. The first crack. At night, Isabella would sometimes sit alone, holding a small folded letter, reading it again and again. Her expression would change. From calm, to worried, to something deeper, something heavy. But she never showed Alexander. Not once. And that was her mistake. Because secrets, even small ones, grow louder in silence. Days passed, then weeks. The tension didn't explode. It built, slowly, quietly, like something waiting. Alexander became colder, more distant, more observant. He started asking fewer questions, but thinking more. And that's always worse. Because when questions stop, assumptions begin. One evening, everything shifted. Alexander came home earlier than usual. The house was quiet, too quiet. He walked in and heard her voice, soft, low, on the phone. "I told you not to call me again." She sounded different, not scared, not angry, but serious, careful. And that was enough. Alexander stopped, listened. His jaw tightened. His hands clenched slightly. But wait. It gets worse. Before he could step in, the call ended. Isabella turned and saw him. There was a pause. A long one. Neither of them spoke. Then she smiled. Softly. Like always. You're home early. But something had already changed. Something invisible. Something dangerous. Alexander didn't respond immediately. He just looked at her, trying to read her, trying to understand what he couldn't see. Who were you talking to? He finally asked. She hesitated, just for a second. But that second was everything. No one important, she said again. Same answer. Same calm tone. Same mistake. Because this time, Alexander didn't believe her. And once belief breaks, everything else follows. That night, he didn't sleep. He stayed awake, thinking, replaying moments, connecting things that didn't fully connect, but felt real enough. The calls, the silence, the secrets, the distance, and the pregnancy, especially the pregnancy. A thought entered his mind, and once it entered, it didn't leave. What if? He didn't say it out loud, but it stayed, growing, spreading, quietly poisoning everything. Meanwhile, Isabella sat alone again, holding that same letter, her hands slightly shaking, her eyes filled with something she couldn't hide anymore. I have to tell him, she whispered. But she didn't. Not yet. Because she believed there was still time. But there wasn't. Because outside, in the shadows of their perfect life, someone else was watching, waiting, smiling, and preparing to destroy everything. A jealous ex. Someone who knew Alexander's weakness. Someone who understood one simple truth. He doesn't need proof. He just needs doubt. And once doubt is planted, the rest becomes easy. And just like that, without noise, without warning, without anyone realizing it, everything was already falling apart. Perfect. We keep the tension rising now. This is where the story starts tightening. The phone kept ringing. At first, it was easy to ignore, but then it didn't stop. Morning, afternoon, late at night, always the same pattern, and always the same reaction. Isabella would look at the screen, freeze for a second, then silence it. But she didn't know. Alexander was watching every single time. He didn't confront her again. Not immediately. Instead, he observed, and that made it worse. Because when a man with trust issues stays quiet, it means he's already building a story in his head. A dangerous one. Days passed. The calls continued. And each time, that small hesitation from Isabella felt bigger, louder, more suspicious. One evening, during dinner, it happened again. The phone vibrated softly on the table. Isabella's hand stopped midair. Her eyes dropped to the screen, just for a second. Then she flipped the phone over. Silence. Alexander didn't touch his food. He just stared at her. Pick it up, he said calmly. It's nothing, she replied. That calm tone again. That same calm tone. And this time, it irritated him. No, he said slowly. Pick it up. There was a pause. A long one. The room felt heavier. Then the phone stopped ringing. And just like that, the moment passed. But not really, because something else replaced it. Something worse. Silence. And silence is louder than arguments. That was her mistake. Later that night, Alexander sat alone in his office. The lights were dim, his laptop open, but he wasn't working. He was thinking, replaying everything. The calls, the hesitation, the calm answers. And then, the thought came back, stronger this time. What if the child? He stopped himself, but it was too late. The idea had already taken root. And once doubt grows, it doesn't shrink. But wait, it gets worse. The next morning, Alexander made a decision. A quiet one. He called someone. Give me everything, he said. Her calls, messages, history. His voice was cold, controlled, final. He didn't ask Isabella again, because now he didn't want answers from her. He wanted proof, and that changed everything. Meanwhile, Isabella was in the bedroom, folding small baby clothes. Soft ones, carefully chosen. Her fingers moved gently, but her mind was somewhere else. She looked at her phone again. No new calls, but that didn't bring peace. It made things worse, because she knew the silence wouldn't last, and she knew something was coming, something she wasn't ready for. Later that day, Alexander received a message. Unknown number. No name. Just a file. A photo. And a short line. Are you sure the baby is yours? He froze. His eyes narrowed. His jaw tightened. He opened the file. And what he saw made everything worse. A picture. Isabella. Talking to a man. Close. Too close. The angle. The timing. The expression. It looked wrong. Or at least, it looked wrong enough. This was the mistake. Because Alexander didn't ask questions. He didn't verify. He didn't pause. He believed what he saw. Because it matched the doubt already in his mind. And that's how manipulation works. It doesn't create new thoughts. It feeds the ones already there. Within hours, another message came. This time, a report. Clean. Official. Cold. DNA test results. Alexander stared at it. His heart slowed, then dropped. According to the document, he wasn't the father. Silence. No anger. No shouting. Just silence. And that kind of silence is dangerous because it means the decision has already been made. Meanwhile, Isabella sat in the hospital hallway, alone, holding that same letter, her hands trembling slightly. She looked down at her stomach, then back at the letter. I have to tell him, she whispered again. But she didn't move, because she didn't know. It was already too late. Back at the mansion, Alexander stood by the window, the report still in his hand, his face unreadable, but his eyes cold, empty, final. The phone kept ringing, but this time, he didn't care who it was, because in his mind, everything was already clear, and that was the moment everything started falling apart. The confrontation didn't happen immediately, and that made it worse, because tension, when stretched too long, becomes unbearable. Isabella noticed it first. The distance, the silence, the way Alexander stopped looking at her the same way. He wasn't angry. He wasn't shouting. He was done, and that scared her more than anything. One night, she finally spoke. Alexander. Her voice was soft, careful, but he didn't respond. I need to tell you something. That made him pause. Slowly, he turned, looked at her. For a moment, there was something there, something human, but it disappeared quickly. What is it? He asked. Cold, flat, controlled. She hesitated, her fingers tightening slightly around the letter behind her back. Her phone rang. Again, and that ruined everything. Alexander's expression changed instantly. There was again the same pattern, the same interruption, the same doubt. Answer it, he said. She didn't move. It's not important. Answer it. His voice sharper now, stronger, final. She slowly picked up the phone, her hands slightly shaking. Then, she declined the call. Silence. And then, something broke. That was the moment. Alexander laughed, but it wasn't a normal laugh. It was empty, cold. You still won't answer, he said. She stepped closer. Alexander, please just listen. No. He cut her off, his voice rising slightly. No more explanations. She froze, confused, hurt. I don't understand. But he did. At least, he thought he did. He walked past her, picked up the file from the table, and threw it in front of her. Then understand that. The paper slid across the floor. Isabella looked down. Her eyes scanned it. And then, she froze. Her breathing changed. Her hands trembled. This doesn't make sense, she whispered. But Alexander didn't react. Because to him, it made perfect sense. Who is he? He asked. Her head snapped up. What? The man in the photo. She shook her head immediately. No, that's not what you think. That's exactly what it looks like. His voice was calm again, but colder than ever. That child. He paused, his eyes locking onto hers. Is not mine. Silence. Heavy. Crushing. Isabella stepped back slowly, tears forming in her eyes. No, that's not true. But she didn't explain. Not properly. Not clearly. And that was her mistake. Because confusion sounds like guilt to someone who already doubts you. She saw something she couldn't explain. The situation. The evidence. The timing. Everything was twisted. But she couldn't prove it. Not yet. Not without revealing everything. And she wasn't ready. Not like this. Not now. And then she looked at him. One last time. Hoping. Waiting. But there was nothing there. No trust. No belief. No love. Silence. And in that silence, the decision was made. Not with words, not with anger, but with distance. And distance hurts more because it means you've already been replaced by doubt. But that wasn't even the worst part. Perfect. Now we enter the breaking point. This is where everything collapses. The next morning, the mansion felt different. Too quiet. Too empty. Like something had already ended, even though no one said it out loud. Isabella didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of the bed, holding the letter tightly, her eyes swollen, her thoughts racing. I have to tell him. But every time she tried to stand, she stopped, because something inside her knew he wasn't ready to listen anymore. And that changed everything. Meanwhile, Alexander stood in his office, still, silent, the DNA report on the table, the photo beside it, two pieces of truth that had already decided everything for him. But wait, there was something else. A message from her, the jealous ex. Clara, are you still doubting me? That was all she wrote. Nothing more. No explanation. No pressure. Just that one line. And it worked. Because doubt doesn't need force. It only needs confirmation. Alexander stared at the message, then at the report, then at nothing. And slowly, his decision became final. This was the moment. He walked out of the office, straight to the bedroom. Isabella looked up immediately. Hope, fear, pain, all at once. Alexander, pack your things. 3 words. Cold, sharp, final. She froze. What? I said pack your things. Her heart dropped. Her hands tightened around the letter. You're not serious. But his expression didn't change. There's nothing left to discuss. She stood slowly, shaking. You're making a mistake. He didn't respond. Because in his mind, he wasn't. That changed everything. She stepped closer, tears falling now. Please just listen to me. I already did. His voice cut through hers. I listen enough. But you don't understand. I understand perfectly. Silence. Then he said it. The one thing that destroyed everything. That child is not mine. It landed like a weight. Heavy. Final. Irreversible. Isabella's breath caught. Her world stopped. No. Her voice broke. That's not true. But again, no explanation. No clarity. Just emotion. And emotion doesn't win against proof. Because Alexander wasn't listening anymore. He was concluding. Leave. The word came out quietly, but it carried everything. What? Leave the house. Her eyes widened. Her body froze. You can't be serious. I am. Silence. Then something shifted. Inside her. Not anger. Not rage. Something deeper. Acceptance. Painful, but calm. And that scared him. Because she didn't fight. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She just nodded. Slowly. Okay. That was it. No argument. No explanation. No defense. And somehow, that made it worse. Because it felt like confirmation. What happened next? No one was prepared for. She walked to the wardrobe. Packed slowly. Carefully. Like someone who already knew this moment would come. She didn't rush. Didn't panic. Didn't break. And that silence was louder than anything. Alexander stood by the door, watching, waiting, but she never turned back. Not once. And that made something inside him tighten. Just slightly. But not enough. Not yet. Minutes later, she stood at the door, one hand on her stomach, the other holding her bag, the letter still hidden. She looked at him for a long time, like she wanted to say something. Something important. Something final. But she didn't. Instead, she whispered softly, I hope one day you understand. And then she walked out, into the rain, into silence, into a truth he wasn't ready for. And just like that, the house became empty, but not quiet, because regret was already on its way. The rain didn't stop. It poured heavily, relentlessly, as if the world itself knew. Something had just gone wrong. Isabella walked slowly, one step at a time, her vision slightly blurred, her breathing uneven, her hand gripping her stomach. But she didn't know. She wasn't just leaving her home. She was walking into something worse. Back at the mansion, Alexander stood alone, the silence now louder than ever. No footsteps, no soft voice, no presence, just emptiness. and the echo of his own decision. But he ignored it, because pride always speaks first. Hours passed. Then night fell. Still no call. Still no message. Nothing. And that was strange, because Isabella always called. Always. But not this time. This was the mistake. Meanwhile, at the hospital, everything was different. Bright lights. Fast movements. Urgent voices. Isabella sat in a wheelchair, her face pale, her body weak, her hand still holding that letter. She had only minutes. A nurse rushed past. Where's her family? No answer, because she came alone, and that said everything. Inside the delivery room, time moved faster, pain sharper, breathing heavier, and in between all that, she whispered something, soft, barely audible. Give him the letter, and then, silence. Back at the mansion, Alexander's phone rang. Unknown number. He stared at it, ignored it. Then it rang again, and again. The phone kept ringing. Something felt off. Different. Heavy. He finally answered. Yes. A voice on the other end. Calm. Professional. Mr. Vaughn. This is the hospital. Silence. His expression changed. Slightly. There's been a situation. His heart dropped. Just a little. Your wife. Pause. You need to come. Everything inside him shifted. Not fully, but enough. Within minutes, he was driving. Fast. Too fast. His grip tight on the wheel. His mind racing. What happened next? Changed everything. He arrived at the hospital. Rushed inside. The hallway long. Bright. Cold. And then, he saw it. A nurse. Holding something. A small folded paper. The letter. She asked me to give you this. Alexander took it slowly. His hands stiff. His heart uncertain. This is where everything changed. He opened it and began to read. Alexander, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't say in time. His breathing slowed. The man you saw is my brother. Silence. His eyes widened. The calls were from him. He found something about you. His grip tightened. I didn't tell you because I needed to be sure. His heart dropped. The DNA test you received is not real. Everything stopped. Someone changed it. His body went still. The child is yours. Tears formed, uncontrolled. But that's not even the truth I was protecting. Pause. Alexander, your name, your inheritance, it was built on a lie. His world shattered. There was a switch years ago. Silence. You were never supposed to be the heir. His breathing broke. And someone is trying to make sure you never find out. Everything connected. Clara, the messages, the report, the setup. It was all planned. And he fell for it. Completely. Too late. The letter slipped slightly from his hand. His knees weak. His chest tight. Where is she? He asked. The nurse hesitated. And that hesitation said everything. And in that moment, everything changed forever. Perfect. Now we close this the right way. Slow. Emotional. Lasting impact. The hallway felt longer than before. Colder. Quieter. Like time itself had slowed down just for him. Alexander stood there. Frozen. The letter still in his hand. His fingers slightly shaking. Where is she? He asked again. This time, his voice wasn't cold. It wasn't controlled. It was breaking. The nurse looked at him. Softly. Carefully. Like someone about to say something that can't be taken back. She's in surgery. Silence. But that wasn't the full truth. And he knew it. What do you mean, surgery? No answer. Just a look. And that look said everything. But he didn't know. This was only the beginning of his regret. Minutes passed. Or maybe hours. He couldn't tell. He sat down slowly on the cold hospital chair. The same place where Isabella had once sat. Alone. Waiting. Holding that same letter. And suddenly, everything felt different. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was heavy. Filled with everything he didn't say. Everything he didn't ask. Everything he didn't believe. That changed everything. He looked down at the letter again. Read it. Again. And again. Each word hitting harder. Sharper. Deeper. The child is yours. His chest tightened. His breathing uneven. The test was fake. His hands clenched. I didn't tell you because I needed to be sure. His eyes closed slowly. And that's when it hit him. Not all at once, But piece by piece, the calls, the hesitation, the silence, the calmness. It wasn't guilt. It was pressure. It was fear. It was someone trying to protect something bigger than herself. And he never gave her the chance to explain. This was the mistake. The biggest one. Not the misunderstanding. Not the doubt. But the decision. He chose to believe proof over the person who never lied to him. And now, he had to live with it. The doctor walked out, mask lowered, face serious. Alexander stood immediately. Fast. Too fast. Doctor. She made it through. A breath of relief. Sharp. Short. But it didn't last. The baby, pause, is in critical condition. Silence. Again, that silence. The one that doesn't scream, but destroys everything quietly. And then, Alexander nodded slowly, like he understood. But he didn't. Not fully. Not yet. Because this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about consequence. He sat back down. This time, heavier, weaker, more human. For the first time in a long time, Alexander Vaughn looked like a man who lost control. Hours later, he was allowed to see her. The room was quiet. Soft beeping sounds. Dim lights. Isabella lay there. Still. Pale. But alive. He walked in slowly, like he didn't deserve to be there. And maybe he didn't. He stood beside her, looked at her face. The same face he turned away from. The same face that tried to speak. And he didn't listen. I was wrong, he whispered, his voice low, broken. But she didn't respond. Because some words come too late. He sat down, carefully, gently took her hand, held it, like he should have done before. Tighter this time, like he was afraid to lose it. I should have trusted you. His eyes filled. I should have listened. Silence. And in that silence, regret finally spoke louder than pride. Meanwhile, down the hallway, a nurse stood beside a small glass window. Inside, a tiny baby, fragile, fighting, connected to machines. Too small for the world it just entered. And yet, carrying a truth bigger than everything. Alexander walked there slowly. Stopped. Looked through the glass. His reflection staring back at him. For the first time, he saw it clearly. Not the billionaire. Not the powerful man. Just someone who made the wrong choice. At the wrong time. And paid for it. I'm sorry, he whispered. Not to anyone specific. Just everything. Time passed. Days. Then weeks. Isabella slowly recovered. The baby, stronger each day. But something had changed. Permanently. Between them. Because healing doesn't erase what happened. It only teaches you to live with it. One evening, they sat together again. Not in the mansion. Not in luxury. Just in a quiet hospital room. Simple. Still. Real. Alexander looked at her. This time, differently. Not with doubt. Not with control. But with understanding. I read the letter, he said softly. She nodded. I know. Silence. Then she asked, do you believe me now? He didn't answer immediately. He stepped closer, held her hand again, gently. I should have believed you before. And that was his answer. Tears rolled down her face. But this time, they weren't from pain. They were from release. From finally being seen. From finally being heard. And in that moment, something fragile started to rebuild. Not perfectly. Not completely. But honestly. Final ending. Sometimes, it's not the truth that destroys things. It's the moment you choose not to listen. Because one decision, one doubt, 1 second of silence can change everything. Alexander learned that the hard way. Not through loss of wealth, not through power, but through something deeper, regret. And even though life gave him a second chance, it came with a reminder he would never forget. Trust is not proven. It is given. And once broken, it may return, but never the same. What would you have done if you were in his position?